The IDP Pros podcasts on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network are brought to you by our Patreon. Score exclusive perks, content, and contests, including our NFL win totals contest with a $1,000 first prize. Join today at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app to get last-minute tickets at the lowest prices guaranteed. Use the promo code SGPN for $20 off. Once again, that's Game Time at gametime.co.
And so, the IDP Pro Manager Pod is a proud member of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, home of the hottest, smartest, and fastest growing sports gambling and fantasy football providers in professional sports entertainment to date. And now, without any further delay, here are your veteran senior IDP pros, Kraig and Gary. Sacking today's hottest NFL IDP.
Hello, everybody. It is Friday, August 18th, 2023, and you are back with the IDP Pro Managers Pod. This is episode 23, and this week we'll be going over NFC IDP camp battles to be paying attention to for your IDP rosters this year. With me, as always, is Gary, the IDP tipster. But we have a special guest this week. He is back, gracing us with his presence. You can find him over at Football Guys, Tripp Brebner. Tripp, how you doing this weekend?
I'm doing well, Craig. I appreciate you all having me on, and it's good to see you all again. Y'all look fresh and recharged after the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, and it's great to talk football with y'all again.
Oh, yeah, brother.
Gary, you recovered from the weekend?
No. I kind of got this like vacation lag type. Yeah, no. Once we get past this weekend, I'll have a couple of days there, I think. I stepped right back into the stack, I guess you could say, when I got home, late Monday night. So, yeah. Great time, man. I had a great time. It was great seeing you and JJ there at the expo, man. And sounds like we might get lucky and see Tripp soon. So, but we better get rolling on that news, man. We got a lot of shit to cover, don't we?
Yeah, we got the camp battles coming up, but we got some news here relevant for IDP leagues with NFL action regular season-wise only 3 weeks away. So, starts off with the news. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reports that Eagles edge player Hassan Reddick will undergo thumb surgery, but is still expected to be ready for the start of the regular season. Raiders edge Tyree Wilson was activated from the non-football injury list, and Seahawks linebacker Jordan Brooks, surprisingly, was activated from the physically unable to perform list. So a couple of guys going to be working themselves up into shape for the rest of camp and the preseason games. Someone that is not going to be ready for the season is Ravens cornerback Marlon Humphrey. He's going to be undergoing foot surgery and is going to be out for an undetermined amount of time, and that's certainly going to affect the secondary there. The Ravens that we just were speaking about signed former Chicago Bears safety DeAndre Houston Carson, and the Bears signed former linebacker Michael Walker from the Falcons, who had been released. In a related move to that, the Falcons signed former USFL defensive MVP linebacker Frank Jinda. The Colts signed safety Ronnie Harrison, formerly of the Browns Jaguars, to a 1-year contract. Free agent cornerback Ronald Darby is making the rounds on free agent visits, looking for a new home this year. And finally, the Vikings signed linebacker and special teams player Tanner Vallejo in a depth move. And like we mentioned at the start of the show, we are going to be getting into these NFC camp battles right after this.
The IDP Pros podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Game Time. Anyone that's ever had to buy tickets for a sporting event or a concert before knows what a pain it can be. If you've ever had to get those tickets at the last minute, you especially know how stressful that can be. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater needs near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. With Aaron Rodgers in town in New York, I've been looking to go to a Jets game this year, and I used Game Time to get my tickets. Their flash deals are absolutely incredible. I was able to find tickets on the 50-yard line for far less than the other sites I looked at. They've got easy-to-find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, images of the seat views, and the lowest price guarantee. They also have event cancellation protection and job loss protection. Forget months of planning in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right now, right up to the day of the event. Snag your tickets without stress at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code SGPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code SGPN for $20 off. Download Game Time today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price guaranteed. You can use promo code CFBX for the college football experience as well. Head on over to gametime.co today. This IDP Pros podcast segment is brought to you by the SGPN Fantasy Doc, Sebastian Fearon. Sebastian is an Army veteran, a doctor of physical therapy, and a strength and conditioning specialist, and he'll be helping us with injury information all season long on the IDP Pros podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at SGPNFootballDoc, all one word.
What's up, guys? SGPN Football Doc here, and today we're heading over to Dallas to talk some injury news. We're talking about safety Donovan Wilson, and he was a big part of this defense last year for Dallas. He led the team with over 100 tackles, and he also added 5 sacks to that tally. So he's a safety that loves to play along the line of scrimmage, and unfortunately, he got injured just near the start of training camp this year. On July 26th, he was carted off the field with what is now being called a calf strain injury. So the expectation is it's a grade 2 injury, so he's going to miss around 4 to 6 weeks is what the Cowboys were saying. And he got a little lucky that this injury occurred near the beginning of training camp. He's got about 6.5 weeks from when the injury started to when they play on week 1. Now, this is not a guarantee that he's going to be back in time. These calf strain injuries, so basically what happens is you have a small tear or some damage in that calf muscle, lower on the back of the lower leg there. And that plays a big piece in your explosiveness and your power in your lower extremity. So really think burst, acceleration, jump ball ability, those kind of things, all very important to the safety position. Now, these soft tissue injuries can be difficult to manage because the muscle may feel good at rest, may feel good with some light work, but really until you start reacting to the ball and start going full speed and ramping up and kind of accelerating, you may not know if that muscle is truly ready. And this carries about a moderate to high re-injury risk. So these calf strain injuries, if they're re-injured, they become that much more damaging, that much more nagging throughout the season. So this is an injury that it should be able to recover from based on the time period. But if there's a setback in his rehab, this could be a serious injury here. Now, at this point, with no setbacks, I'm expecting Donovan Wilson to be back for week 1. However, this is definitely a situation to monitor going forward. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Follow for more.
All right, and that is going to lead us right into the Dallas Cowboys regarding these camp battles to watch. That's some good information there on Donovan Wilson. Tripp, do you see that this could be potentially, in regards to the safeties, lead to a little bit more playing time for Jaron Krys off the top, or do you think that's probably pretty much just laid out how it's going to be, given that it sounds like Wilson's going to be back on time?
Well, I'm never real fond of taking guys that have leg injuries during the preseason and looking at getting them into a draft and hoping that they're ready week 1. So I'm looking at IDP from ADP from the IDP show, and they have Krys at 32nd safety by ADP and Wilson at 16th. And I'd be more comfortable reversing those, quite honestly. I think I like Krys. I think he's a good player. He was banged up last year and therefore was outscored by Wilson, especially early in the year. And then Krys, once he got healthy, found his footing, they were more equal. So I find that the caution should be taken on the injury. And I don't hate Wilson, but I just think he's being overdrafted right now.
Gary?
Oh, I've just been enjoying the cheap shares of Krys I've been able to get the last few days or last few weeks in best ball. So I think nothing more than that, really. I mean, Unless the price is right, I'm not going to reach for Wilson. He's got a little bit of injury history anyhow, I believe.
All right. Well, looking at the edge battle here for the edge 2, sort of in name, depending on how they end up using Micah Parsons. They've talked about using him all over the field more, unless as a edge player. We'll see if that actually happens because, of course, DeMarcus Lawrence is there as the main defensive end. But the other two sort of battling it out here, Dorrance Armstrong and Sam Williams. Gary, do you have any feelings on how that one is going to play out based on how training camp and the preseason has gone so far?
Well, reportedly, it's Sam Williams to lose. So as we went through and I made this doc or for the show and come up with some of these to talk about, it's more of just kind of like updates and battles anymore, So some of these are clearer than others, but it seems to be his to lose at the moment. As the guy that's probably going to get the most snaps across from Lawrence. But, it's not over quite yet. It's Sam Williams, I believe, got injured early in camp, if I'm not correct. So he's, just kind of get back in the groove of things. But just letting everybody know, for the most part, it sounds like Sam Williams is actually going to have a decent role.
You excited about Sam Williams coming up there was he a second-year player, third year maybe there, Tripp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's an interesting piece. I think he's probably a long way from being fantasy relevant outside of deep leagues, but I do look for him to take a step forward this year and start to get on that path where we're starting to think about him next year as a viable piece.
All right. Well, that does it for the Cowboys here. And Tripp, I'm going to throw it to you to sort of go where you want to next for these NFC teams for a camp battle or situation that you find interesting.
Okay. Well, let's jump on the team that played last night, which is the Philadelphia Eagles. They showed us something. We got a good update, I think, of what they intend to do with their linebacker core. So that's good news. And so if you're listening and have a draft here starting today or this weekend, then you need to know that Zach Cunningham seems to be in pole position to get that LB2 job next to Nakobe Dean. He started last night in that spot. Miles Jack was the other free agent add, and he didn't start playing until late in the game. And I think the reason they added Cunningham and Jack was because they were dissatisfied with what they had at that weak side linebacker role with Nick Morrow and Christian Ellis, just kind of a depth piece most of his career. So Zach Cunningham is not going to play full-time, I don't think, but he didn't play full-time in Tennessee in the last couple of years, and he was still a useful piece for fantasy gamers. So I like him as an LB4 type that you probably get even later than that, and add not super high floor ceiling, but just an adequate piece that you could plug in there, certainly in the middle of the season as injuries and bye weeks start to pile up. So that's real interesting to me. The second piece is the safety situation. Terrell Edmonds continues to have the lead on the strong safety role. Reed Blankenship is locked in as the free agent as the free safety, which might come as a surprise to folks who aren't following it that closely. Blankenship, I don't expect a ton from for fantasy, but the strong safety spot is interesting because that role, if it would be both full-time strong safety and a dime linebacker role for either Edmonds or the rookie Sidney Brown, that is interesting to me. And we've seen Edmonds not do much in that type of role at Pittsburgh, so I'm not super excited about him. But if Sidney Brown can overtake him in this preseason, which is not out of the question, Brown has played well, Edmonds is Jag, then I would think you have a couple of free squares there for very cheap in drafts with both Cunningham and Sidney Brown.
That's interesting about Blankenship, too, because there was a lot of hype about him this offseason all over the place from that limited playing time that he got. And, of course, showing up against Aaron Rodgers. And I've seen him taken a lot higher than these other guys so far in drafts, or even, the past month.
Mm-hmm. It's the nature of the beast. I mean, I'm hating all those shares of Morrow I had early in the season. But what you're going to do, you can't forecast some kind of signings like this.
No, and I mean, you sort of know what you have with Cunningham and Jack, and I think that's probably part of what drew the Eagles to them to say, hey, we've seen these guys the past couple of years. We got an idea of what they are, what they could provide. Probably looking for more of just a steady veteran hand there, and if they're not getting it out of Morrow, they're going to want something like that next to Nakobe Dean, who's played well, but again, for all intents and purposes, he's a first-time starter. Clearly, he's not much more than a rookie with the limited playing time that he got last year.
And they can get linebackers dime a dozen like we get DBs off the waiver wire nowadays.
There you go.
Well, Gary, we're going to throw it to you. Which camp battle or team do you want to head to look at next?
Let's see here. I think I'd just like to probably hit all the lines, brother. Let's get him out here. I know Derrick Barnes apparently is getting a second shot. He must have started this past game, I believe. Got most snaps, started at middle linebacker. Anzalone didn't play. Jack Campbell did get to play something like a quarter of the snaps, or maybe I have those snaps reversed. Maybe it was Derrick Barnes, but either way, Derrick Barnes did get to start at middle linebacker. Malcolm Rodriguez was kind of on the outskirts there, in my opinion. Snap counts are something you can read. Now, what do you read on who gets the most snaps or who doesn't, kind of can play against each other, because they might just be seeing what Derrick Barnes can do. Again, give him a chance, let's see what he's got. Not like Anzalone needs to be out there. And Jack Campbell, I mean, you want him to get those reps, but do you really want him out there the whole entire time? If he's, ideally your first week one starter next to Anzalone. What do you guys think?
I think Barnes is interesting in that he only played 1 year of off-ball linebacker in college. He was an edge defender and then a fourth-round pick, and had to earn his reps and work his way up. And I'm a little disappointed, I guess, that they used a first-round pick on a linebacker this year, because I felt like that, maybe there was an opportunity for Barnes to take kind of a two-down role there next to Anzalone. So, but it'd have to be Campbell really underperforming, I think, not to take that role.
Yeah, and they could be looking to see, they re-signed Anzalone, but with the way that contract is set up, he's probably not going to be there for all 3 years. They still have Barnes for a couple more years. And of course, they have Malcolm Rodriguez. They're going to want to see what they have with these younger guys. I think they got a good feel for Rodriguez last year, but he's probably not going to be an every down player most of his career in the NFL, unfortunately, just based on his size. But he can be productive in those spot starts and filling in for guys that we've seen before. So it'll be an interesting to look at, but I do think with that draft capital, it's probably going to end up coming down to Campbell. Tripp, you're up next.
Well, let's talk a little bit about another one of your news items. You had Jordan Brooks coming off PUP for the Seattle Seahawks, and it's fascinating to me just the number of players that suffered catastrophic injuries last year and are not on PUP that seem like they're ready to go for week one. And this includes guys on both sides of the ball, from Javonte Williams to Tracy Walker. And here's another one. He's a guy that had surgery, I think, January 14th, that is, with Jordan Brooks. And so the odds that he's ready to go full steam ahead to begin the season seem low. But then again, you have more short-term IR spots. Maybe the plan is to just kind of stash him there when the season starts. I don't know, but you got to have a reason to do that, right? So if you activate him off PUP, that then what's your logic on putting him back on it again? So, but what we wind up with Seattle is a situation where there's an awful lot of bodies in the middle of that defense to make tackles. You have Bobby Wagner and Devin Bush, Jordan Brooks, Jamal Adams, if he can come back healthy, and Julian Love. And there's just not enough snaps for all these guys to be productive. But they all have name recognition. They all get drafted in fantasy drafts. I get it. It's hard to imagine how this is going to break down in a way that's productive for everybody. So Devin Bush to me looks like a depth signing. I think he's probably just there to, as an insurance against Brooks being ready. I think a bigger question is are Brooks and Wagner both going to play full time? I think from what we saw in that defense last year is that they would like that to be the case. They tried for Cody Barton full time. Yeah. That didn't really work. They switched to a rookie nickel, and then that worked for about 2 weeks, and then offenses figured them out. And so I think they're hoping for a nickel group that they can put out there and rely on fairly reliably with two linebackers and 5 DBs. So it's really kind of Jordan Brooks versus the clock, see if he can get back to what he was. But you wouldn't want to count on it until the second half of the season, but it's certainly interesting to follow.
The only thing I could even add to that is anything that I could add to that would just be a report I come across this morning about maybe using Jamal Adams as linebacker a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well,
probably only last couple games, but it's out there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with Adams, right? Is I think they've gotten to the point where they kind of realize that whatever they get out of him is a bonus. That's why they signed Julian Love. I'm expecting
that's a hell of an expensive bonus, man.
You ain't kidding. You ain't kidding.
Right.
But, but then again, he's a good enough player when he's active that he adds value. So if he's just in a sub package role, then maybe they're satisfied with that. And the other thing to think about is they weren't a good defense last year. They're probably going to want to mix and match parts until they get the right group of players on the field.
The IDP Pros podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network are brought to you by our Patreon. Sign up for the Patreon to get access to exclusive contests, including the NFL Win Totals contest that has a $1,000 first place prize. Besides those season-long contests, they also have weekly contests just for our patrons, plus a monthly SGP Stories podcast that's completely ad-free and full of behind-the-scenes stories from SGPN. There's also a Discord channel just for our patrons. Only you can prevent corporate gambling. Do your part and sign up today for the SGPN Patreon. That's at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon.
Gary, I want to stay in that division and throw one to you that I find really interesting for a name that's been a joke in the NFL fantasy community for a while. With the San Francisco 49ers, battle of Clelin Ferrell and Drake Jackson. So Clelin Ferrell, we all know the story with him. He was drafted like 4th overall or pick or something that year, and flamed out pretty wildly in Oakland. There wasn't even being used a whole lot, and when he wasn't very viable. And he's going over here to the 49ers, where we talked about this a little bit earlier in the year. He's in about as good of a situation as he can be in, with a defensive line that they're going to have there, where the focus isn't going to be on him at all. He had the talent, in college, even he was taken way too high. But the reports are that he's outplaying Drake Jackson so far. So if that does play out, and Drake Jackson's had some injury stuff, Ferrell is the guy there to start the year and just getting the majority of the snaps. Do you have any deep league interest in him?
Man, from afar. I mean, I love the opportunity that the guy's going to get. I did know who you were saying as soon as you said 2 key words, division and joke. Yeah. So anyhow, poor guy. I mean, hopefully this does something for him, but man, I'd rather see what Drake Jackson has. So he's questionable right now. I know he's not quite. I don't think the situation is quite like Sam Williams, where it's his to kind of lose. I think Drake Jackson is going to have to earn his, especially considering the pedigree that Ferrell is bringing to the whole situation. So it's something to monitor in deeper leagues. Of course we've got Bozer for your shallow stuff. So I'm not sure what kind of production would be even available if you look at this in defense as an entire, there's no vacuum. Everybody's going to be fighting to get their own production because you got some hell of a linebackers, that secondary. It's one hell of a defense, stout up front.
Tripp?
Yeah, it's an upside play in deeper leagues. The Drake Jackson, I thought was locked into, not quite locked in, but certainly had the inside track to replace Samson Ebukam in the defense with 65% of the snaps last year, but only worth 5 sacks, in part because of Samson Ebukam. But it's just got to be a serious red flag that Ferrell's in there pushing him for reps, and so it's a situation I'm content to ignore for fantasy.
What situation do you want to move on to next here, Tripp?
Let's talk about another one with a big pile of bodies in the middle that we are really going to struggle to see how to sort out the snaps, which is the Carolina Panthers. I was pretty surprised in week 1 to see that Jeremy Chinn did not start at safety. You had Xavier Woods, who was a holdover from the last regime as a free agent signing, and then the new free agent signing, Von Bell, starting and playing a full complement of snaps in the vanilla defense that the Panthers showed in week 1. We knew they would show a vanilla defense, and Ejiro Evero, the defensive coordinator, has said that they're not going to show their cards in terms of how they're going to deploy Chinn. But it's hard for me to imagine that not showing their cards includes not even starting him. I sincerely expected that he'd be back there alongside Von Bell in vanilla 2 safety, 2 high sets. And I was really surprised that he's not even being used much as a safety per se in a traditional deep safety sense. And so what that meant then is that he was competing for snaps with Frankie Louvu, another fantasy darling, because he was a breakout player last year. And Shaq Thompson was wearing the green dot as relaying signals for the defense. So you've got 2 players being drafted awfully highly or eating into each other in Chinn and Louvu. And it's certainly that's one preseason game. It's certainly worth monitoring to see if that trend continues. But if it does, then both of those guys are being severely overdrafted. Yeah,
even you mentioned it's a new regime, which is always important to mention for players when they're looking at stuff that happened in the past. But even in the past year or two, Jeremy Chin hasn't been used even as much as he was that first year as a linebacker. He's been moved around a lot. He's been out there as a nickel. And a lot of those stats that people remember, from those huge years, or I think it was even in the same game, he had 2 touchdowns or fumble recoveries or interception or something for a touchdown in the same game. And when you're looking at your year-long stats and stuff, those things create a big blip to raise people up in rankings. And I agree that Jeremy Chin's probably being a little bit overvalued at this point because we don't know completely how he's going to be used. And I think it's sort of like Deebo Samuel. Sorry, Gary, I'm bringing up offense. When he had that amazing year with how he was used in San Francisco, people are pining for the events of years past. Like, if he can only do that again. But the team has changed. The situation has changed. And you can't be expecting what someone did 2-3 years ago to just keep occurring. So that's a really good note. Gary, wash the dirty O out of our mouths and give us your thoughts on it.
Well, I might have the early advantage and no life situation where I was up really early this morning and I seen a little report off of coming out. Something about them listing him as the nickel back.
Yeah.
So, what the hell? What do you do with that? I got a lot of shares of them in Sleeper just for that slash. I not like deadly killer shares, but I got quite a few shares. Of course, he was available because everybody's avoiding him. Thank you. I'll try it. It's the best I got. We got to see what he's got. There's a lot of talent. I still think that they find a way to get some guys like Deion Jones in some packages and such. I think we're going to see some off-the-wall shit. So if it ain't Luvu or Thomas or Burns, Von Bell apparently, I think I'm kind of pumping the brakes on the rest of these guys for the moment.
Yeah, I think they've even been using Luvu a bit as an edge player. As opposed to a traditional linebacker, which could certainly switch things up with how he's used and the value that you get out of him. So how they end up deploying these players, like you mentioned, Tripp, in the regular season compared to now, might be a shock to people once we get there in 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to head to, Gary?
Let's go to Minnesota. How about that, Josh Metellus? I'm going to screw this up. I apologize, sir, wherever you are. Josh Metellus? Oh, yeah, swinging a bunt. Anyhow, so, I think Lewis Sim was actually a guy that was going to get this offseason hype in a lot of places. I was a Bynum fan coming into last year. And even when he came in the league, I like how he came out of California, was switched from cornerback and getting his free safety spot there. But so I actually kind of shaded him this year. I thought Sim was going to get it. Of course, we're also talking about fading on DBs. So, and it's not like Bynum lit it up last year. But who did was Metellus. And he's still, from what I see, Sim's pretty well dropped off. And it's between Bynum and Metellus right now. And what Metellus put on the field last year from an IDP or an film perspective was just grade A shit for considering his background. I think that Tripp probably could fill us in a little bit better on that.
Well, but Metellus is interesting that he's playing, like you said, he's just kind of come out of nowhere and is earning a big piece of the defense. And Brian Flores, as the new defensive coordinator, he was with Miami for several years prior to last year. And he has a lot of experience with three safety sets. And it looks like Metellus and not seen as the third safety. And so, Bynum is back there too. So what we also know about that is that even though he played a lot of three safety sets, only one of those safeties was typically full time. And so I think Harrison Smith is really only a viable fantasy option out of the three. Not sure Craig's still with us.
Nope. I think we might be paused. So I'll tell you what, man. So basically what we have been trying to accomplish here is get through as much as we can out of a very long list. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull the trigger here. Let's talk about the free safety situation with the New York Giants. You got Jason Pinnock. I believe he came in last year and had a hell of a showing when Dan Belton, another guy that I was hoping would come through. I believe Belton is a second-year guy, so that's what I get for thinking a rookie is going to get something accomplished very well. But either way, I was actually really intrigued with the Bobby McCain signing this year coming out of Washington. That free safety position for them is just, we know it's gold. But Pinnock apparently is the guy in the lead. And like I said, I don't know if this is even a battle at this point. We're just giving a camp update, which I'm sure you have more for us.
No, I'm with you. I'm right exactly with you. I saw the McCain signing, and I allowed myself to be distracted by that as well. I'm like, all right, he fits as a deep safety, and McKinney will be all over the first and second levels, and that's not how it's shaping up. Pinnock is he played reasonably well last year. After he played because McKinney got hurt mid-season, and then Pinnock played down the stretch, and he was reasonably effective. And so it's always hard to read those situations sometimes when you see they let Love go. It's like, well, who do they think is going to backfill? And you look for draft capital, or you look for a young player who played really well. And I guess they decided Pinnock was that. And so I'm glad for that. It's a free square for fantasy gamers. He's a guy that has, certainly DB2 upside, if not more. And he's just basically free in drafts. And so, yeah, he's locked in. Like you said, that's a camp update. He's the starter alongside McKinney.
No doubt. All right. Anybody else with the Giants you think is worth talking about? I know for IDP purposes, folks, I'm talking about McFadden, inside linebacker. I guess he's getting the most of the second linebacker reps next to Okereke. Do you think it's actually going to amount to anything?
No.
Right.
I don't. The question is, how deep is your league, right? So there's some places like on MFL where because of position designation changes, you might be having to chase every starter you can imagine. And so in which cases is a situation worth monitoring. Darian Beavers seemed to be the lead at the ILB2 spot at the beginning of the month, and McFadden seems to have overtaken him. But this is a true camp battle. One of these two guys is going to earn that spot. And is either guy going to play even 70% of the snaps? I kind of doubt it. But it's just a question of how deep your league is. And plus, too, they play a fair amount of man. You've got Bobby Okereke in the middle. I don't expect this to be a super productive spot for a second linebacker, but it's fun to monitor.
Yep. Well, go ahead and swing away, man. Pick us one.
Well, I think we've got 4 or 5 teams that are interesting in the sense that they're not so much camp battles for a position, but possibly a competition to see who's going to be the LB1, who's going to wear the dot versus who's not. And like last year, we had Michael Walker was wearing the dot in the first half of August, and then he didn't hold it. He gave it up, and Rashaan Evans played the dot. And as we know from history tells us, that Rashaan Evans ended up being the IDP piece that we wanted for fantasy leagues. And Michael Walker was eventually displaced by Troy Anderson, the rookie, and has since been cut. So we've got literally 3 or 4 different spots where the dot is a bit in question versus what we might have expected. And I'll start with Green Bay, because I know y'all talked about this a couple of weeks ago about how it looked like Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell, their ADPs seemed to be reversed. Well, it's quite surprising that on week 1 to see Quay Walker with the dot, and meantime, Campbell has since gotten banged up. And so it will be interesting to see if Quay Walker holds the dot. And if so, what does that mean? I'm guessing that Campbell will still be okay. I think that this team wants to be a 2 full-time linebacker team. They express that as the reason they drafted Quay Walker to begin with. But what it tells us is that, I think is your comment on your pod, and I think I might have made the same comment on a different pod, was that Devondre Campbell's being radically underdrafted and that Quay Walker's being radically overdrafted. The Walker investment could work out at this point. And so I think that's really the biggest takeaway.
Hey, all you crazy IDP fans. We are hosting the IDPros Breast Cancer Awareness Giveaway, where you can win a Roquan Smith Baltimore Ravens jersey. All you have to do to enter is donate $3 or more to any nationally recognized cancer organization and post a pic of your donation with the hashtag IDPROS. That's hashtag IDPros. The drawing will be held on August 24th. Find more information on this podcast's Twitter page or on any of your favorite IDP Pros accounts. Enter today and help us bring cancer to its knees.
Well, I am not going to stifle anything, and I am glad to see that Kraig is back to take this bus over because I barely kept it on the road.
Oh, you've been doing this long enough. I'm sure you did just fine, Gary. All right, where do we leave off? Who do you guys talk about last on here?
Packers. Linebackers.
Packers. Well, why don't we finish the NFC North then? Because it looks like we got one team left there, which would be the Chicago Bears. Of course, they made a splash signing to help out their pass rush with Yannick Ngakoue a couple weeks ago, but the other sort of defensive end edge position there is a toss-up by going into the season. Some people they brought in. Of course, Travis Gibson was a holdover from last year, but DeMarcus Walker and Rasheem Green are also there. Tripp, I'm going to go to you since I don't know where we're at and you're our guest. How do you see that defensive end position playing out for Chicago? And do you see any fantasy relevancy? That's the bigger question for us.
Well, I think the starters, based on the fact that this regime has signed them and paid them decent money, are Ngakoue and DeMarcus Walker. Ngakoue fits well as the Leo. DeMarcus Walker's the big end. Gibson and Dominique Robinson are depth pieces. The question is, can this defense be good enough to really generate some big plays? And I think Ngakoue is one of only a handful of players who have had 8 sacks for 6 consecutive seasons or something like that. So yeah, he's worth monitoring if you're in a big play league. I don't really have any interest in Walker. I could imagine a scenario where he piled up some tackles in a tackle hobby format, but I won't be drafting him anywhere. He might be a waiver ad. So I'm not super excited about this group.
Gary?
Rasheem Green made a little bit of a impact here in camp or something. I believe he's a second year, maybe third year guy that just hasn't really, I can't remember, he got hurt or something. At the moment, I'm willing to throw a dart in any deep best ball format. And he was like the last LBDB pick out of what was the IDP show, guys? The longest one. I think Superflex. Anyways, I think I got him like 50th round or some shit. So I dotted him on there. But unless somebody can overachieve in that first couple of weeks in that position, I don't really see anything, just like Tripp was mentioning. It's just probably not going to be relevant. It's a prove it type thing for me.
I mean, Rasheem Green was a guy that Seattle, and talk about a long list of edge players that Seattle has drafted that just haven't gotten much out of. He was the 3rd round pick of theirs in 2018, so he's been around a while. He was with Houston last year.
Okay.
6.5 sacks is his career high, 48 tackles. I'd be surprised if we see any more than that out of him at this point in his career, going into season 6 for him. Another one, we haven't touched on the NFC South here. So, Tripp, are there any NFC South situations that you want to talk about?
Yeah, picking up on the theme that we touched on right before you got back was who's wearing the dot. And the question in Atlanta is who's wearing the dot. Is it Caden Ellis or is it Troy Anderson? And if so, does it matter? And my guess is that it does. I think you have 2 pretty similar players here, and one of them has a chance to be full-time, while the other one might play, 70, 80% of the snaps. And that could be a difference between being an LB2 and an LB4 on the season. So I'm pretty interested to see who that is. I don't know. I don't have any intel on that, unfortunately. I need to see it on the field in the preseason. My guess is that it's Anderson, but because Ellis has not done that in the past, I think Ellis fits in a similar role that he had last year with New Orleans, coming over with Ryan Nielsen, the defensive coordinator. And so I'm eager to see Anderson given an opportunity to grow and to do more. And so hopefully that's the play. And if it's not, then Ellis is your man.
And Gary, I know you had thrown on here for your deep degenerates, the second cornerback there. Do you have any feelings or care one way or the other, if it's either Flowers or Okudah?
No, I was just searching because to me it wasn't actually a competition. I mean, it's clear to me that Anderson and Ellis was coming into the, starting roles. So buying in on each, I should say.
All right. Well, we're down to a few here, Gary. We got the Saints, Buccaneers, Cardinals, Rams, and Commanders.
Well, let's go with let's get the lightweight out of the way. So we got a second linebacker position open with Arizona right now, according to reports that I've seen. I believe late last night, maybe early this morning, that it looks like it's between Josh Woods and Krys Barnes. I believe, Woods is a throwback from Denver, and then we got Barnes coming out of Green Bay, if I assume so. But and then I'm going to mess this name up too. So Papo. Okay. All right. So Papo is the rookie that we're looking at that could probably squeeze in here maybe mid-season if the other two aren't worth a crap. But I'm thinking I think either one of these veterans can hold this job down because it's going to be a part-time role to begin with, more than likely, considering all the other talent they have around them. But it's kind of a camp update if you're in some deep D-Gen league and you're looking for some way deep backup. Which one are you guys taking? Who you going to give it to? Krys Barnes? You're going to give it to Josh Woods, or are you going to go ahead and just stash that rookie?
Yeah, I'm going to ignore the LB2. Like you said, I don't think it's a full-time role.
Right.
I think the interesting story there is the safety situation. You've got Isaiah Simmons has told the incoming regime that he does not want to play linebacker. Therefore, he's going to play safety. And with 4.39 speed and 6'4", he's going to get some deep center field work. And so the question is how does he fit, and what is the deployment between himself, Buda Baker, and Jalen Thompson, and which of those guys is not going to play a full complement? The three of them will play enough that the LB2 is not going to matter. But the bigger question then for me is which of those safeties is going to matter? And I was watching the Cardinals preseason 1 game, and it looks like there might be enough hybrid linebacker type snaps and dime settings that one of those safeties is going to have some value. And so I would put a chip on Baker, even though he's not the biggest guy out of that group, just because he's been there before. He's done it. He's been productive for us. There was one year where he led the entire NFL in solo tackles. And so I think he's a guy that I may have undervalued to date. And then the other two guys, Simmons and Thompson, are being highly drafted still. I think that there may be a clear winner out of this group, but I'm curious as y'all's take.
I'm still taking Buda Baker. I still like him the best out of the group. When he's played consistently throughout his career, he's one of the more consistent safeties at a position that we know is just wildly inconsistent year to year. And Isaiah Simmons, I think they need to figure out how to work him in, but he's proven to, at least at college, if not, the NFL level to this point, he can be played all over the field and he can do a lot of different things. I know he doesn't want to be a linebacker, but he does know how to play a linebacker because the time in the league so far. So I think he's going to be used all over, and probably a little bit less than the other two, because let's face it, Thompson and Baker are proven NFL safeties on a team that needs proven NFL talent on that defensive side, not to mention that offense. As the season goes on, and I expect them to be, in that running for worst team in the league, he might get more runs so they can try to see, hey, are we going to want to be making this guy an offer to keep him in the future because they didn't pick up the option for him? And Simmons is going to want to show what he can do too, trying to get a big contract after this and show, hey, I am an NFL player, despite possibly being miscast to start the year. So later in this season, maybe Simmons, but I'm sticking with the two that have proven it on that team the past few years with Buda and then Thompson.
Yeah, I haven't had any problems with Baker. Never have. When it comes to Jalen Thompson, though, I've been enjoying some late shares of him that you can get. And I know that he didn't do as well. I think I do have the right fellow, right? Yes.
Yep.
No. All right. So I think that his ceiling could be a little higher this year if he's playing that true role, depending what they do with Simmons. I'm not really concerned about Simmons. I'm surely not seeing his probably most productive year at this point. I don't think his ceiling is going to be there worth reaching for, and that designation is definitely just like Chin's. I was getting some decent deals on it, drafting. So I'm not too concerned about this secondary whatsoever. Yeah. Collins has a little bit of concern. I mean, I don't know what to do with him. I've seen him ranked in the top 10, and that makes me nervous. So I thought maybe I'd get you guys' thoughts on that real quick before we pivot off to something else.
Yeah, the top 10 ranking I saw was Mike Clay's ESPN projections. And it's in part because he's projecting a huge number of tackles for Collins. And so it makes you wonder, Does Clay envision a scenario where Collins is playing some inside and some outside? My guess is that his role looks a little bit more like Hassan Reddick's from last year in Philly, because that's the new defensive staff that he has. And Reddick played a little bit of off ball, a little bit of coverage, but not enough to really move the needle all that much. And of course, Reddick has experience being an inside linebacker too, and didn't pile up a ton of tackles. So I'm not as excited about Collins as Clay is. And he's a guy that you're basically hoping gets home a few times because of volume, but expecting a guy to just go out on the edge and immediately be an impact pass rusher seems a bit far-fetched to me. I don't think that Hassan Reddick should be seen as a typical path to success in the NFL.
Well, and Collins didn't show it really in college at all either. I mean, he was a tackle machine in college, but you're talking about those big plays. He didn't do a whole lot of that at Tulsa. There was the hope that maybe he could convert to there, but to your point, Tripp, you're just going out on a wish and a hope at that point, thinking that this is magically going to manifest itself, because that doesn't usually happen. Even the players that find it, it takes some time. And to switch this first year in this new system and everything, I like Collins long term, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope for this year that he just magically finds it.
Well, I'm glad you guys confirmed that, because I'm thinking I might have seen that Friday night at the Expo. And I don't remember much about that night. So, and I couldn't find that blurb again. So that's why I was bringing it up, because I'm not convinced either.
I want to bring up a name here. So in the IDP Kings Classic that I was in at the Expo on Saturday morning, fantastic. It was 14 teams, 34 rounds. Did a little like 4.5 hours with a couple breaks in there. You don't have to start any safeties, but the scoring is pretty much evened out. And a name that I got here late that surprised me, I think it was somewhere in the 30s for the rounds that I got him. And one of the few safeties I took was Derrick Forrest out of Washington. He's a guy that, seemingly came out of nowhere. He was a late round pick and showed himself similar to what Cameron Curl did for Washington. And we know Cameron Curl's the big name there. A lot of people have excitement about Tre'Tavious Martin. So, Tripp, I want to ask you, am I right in thinking it's still Derrick Forrest's job for the number 2 safety this year, or is it going to be more of a switch up with the 3 of them being played a lot?
Yeah, I think Forrest is playing full time. I agree with you there. I have not seen a lot of buzz out of Quan Martin that he would be able to come in there and carve out a large role. I think they're envisioning him as a nickel and not so much a safety, which I was skeptical that they would. Their nickel role to date has been more of a true cover corner, and so they may be looking at doing something a little different. That said, late in the year, they really mixed things up after Cole Holcomb got hurt. They showed a lot of 3 safety looks with Bobby McCain playing in the corner. That said, in the slot. That said, Bobby McCain started his career as an NFL corner, so he had that experience. It sounds like Quan Martin has been drafted to play that role, which sounds like a part-time slot role. And then I think Forrest and Curl are in fact your starters. I do prefer Curl of the 2. I think he's more of the box safety type, and so he's my priority add out of those.
Yeah, I'm with you, Craig.
In the teens, he was one of the big name safeties. There's a lot of people really excited about him this year, but I didn't see a reason why, again, other than maybe positional value. Forrest was dropping into the 30s, so I was happy to get him there. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah. Oh no, that's perfect. I drafted him higher than 30th round. Believe me. Know what I mean? I like his opportunity. I like how they did use him last year. So I think he was overlooked here early in the year by a lot of people. He's going to catch on some of these standard leagues. He's going to be a waiver wire guy for some of the shallower leagues. Anyways, I'll tell you what, I'd like to just wrap this up, man, and just let you guys do your thing with Tripp, because I want to make sure that we get his take on Carl Anderson, Peyton, and the rookie Falsky or whatever. Now, my understanding is, it's Carl Granderson's job to lose down there. But, it's not a lock. So what do you got on that?
The way I read that is that I thought going into the camp that Carl Granderson would have done enough in the preseason, in the last season, I should say, to have earned the right to start coming into the season. And so Isaiah Foskey, as being a second-round pick, I didn't feel like he was a threat. I guess I underestimated the investment, the sunk cost fallacy with draft capital in Peyton Turner, because it did seem like that Peyton Turner was neck and neck with him, that it was a total toss up. And this is dating back to July, which seems like a long time ago right now. When Peyton Turner, it seemed to be neck and neck with Carl Granderson in terms of who would start at that spot. But what I've seen, reporting I've seen, says that Granderson is kind of steadily been ahead of him, and that Granderson will continue to start, which is, so he's a guy that's not been quite as sneaky quiet of a name as I thought. There are other guys like Joey Hagan that have been on him. So there's some people that are following him, but I do think he's an interesting piece. He's a guy that has some athleticism and has some talent. And the reason why he was so lowly drafted is because he got in some legal trouble when he was at Wyoming, which is in itself not a huge football school. And so it led to him. I don't think he was drafted because I think he was like, he may have even been incarcerated. It was something serious where he was really out of loop. And the Saints gave him some time and some patience to get into the roster, to get into New Orleans. Like, I want to say midway in his rookie year, and get up to speed and catch on and then develop in time. So he's certainly paid his dues and has developed into, I think a decent NFL starter. And so I think he certainly stands to reason that he can outproduce what Marcus Davenport did last year. So he's a guy that I like as a conventional position designation DE3 or a edge DE5, edge 5 or so on true position formats.
Nice.
So we got two teams left here. Quick, do you want to go to either one of them, Gary?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got anything on the Rams for us there, Tripp?
I think the Rams, it's for as few starters as they have back, it's kind of not much to talk about in my opinion, because you got John Johnson now is going to come in and play safety alongside Jordan Fuller, so that's set. Christian Roseboom is the guy that looks like the starting linebacker 2 there next to Ernest Jones. I don't expect a ton from him in fantasy. I think he's being used as a 2-down player in the preseason. I expect that to continue. So again, you'd have to be an awfully deep league to care. And then you got the edge defenders like Michael Hoyt, former 300-pound defensive tackle, is one starter. And people are hoping that the rookie third rounder Byron Young starts at the other edge. He's been banged up. It's just we talked about.
Right.
I think between the Cardinals and the Rams, I think the Seahawks and the 49ers are thinking, boy, we got 4 easy wins right there. Those two teams are looking rough, man. I don't know.
Right.
Can the Rams even field an NFL caliber defense at this point? Man.
Oh yeah. And then wrap it up for us with Tampa Bay. I was looking at the Joe Chiron, that opposite side of Shaq Barrett. So if Craig, you got anything for that? Wrap that up with Tripp.
No, I mean the names that sort of were battling out is your favorite Anthony Nelson, Gary, and then Joe Tryon, and Yaya Diaby. Everything I was seeing is still probably going to be Joe. He was the late first round pick out of them. He came on strong at the end of last year, and I think he's going to be the guy that gets the shot. But if he doesn't, improve and sort of start to break out like they're hoping, Nelson, he's your deep guy for a reason. And that defense still overall should be pretty good. It's just what is we going to get out of that offense in Tampa Bay to be able to complement it. But Tripp, any thoughts you have on that one?
Yeah, Barrett's another one of those guys. Achilles injury last year. Here he is. He's seemingly ready to go. I'm just skeptical that all these guys can really be ready to go, and all of them defy typical expected recovery times from past years with Achilles and ACLs and whatnot. And so I had a little bit of conversation with John Macri on the Big Nickel Pod about this last month. And, Shaq Barrett's a good player if he's healthy. But again, is he ready to go 10 months later? And people look at Brandon Graham last year. He had 11 sacks, his career high after an Achilles injury. And it was shocking. I don't know if they're putting, I can't remember the stuff that's in Wolverine's bones, but what are they putting in these guys? Adamantium. Yeah, these guys getting supplemented with adamantium to get back on the field. It's just it's amazing.
Nice.
Well, that's going to do it for us this week. We're going to be figuring out what we got going on next week because, again, 3 weeks from now is going to be already the Thursday night game for the NFL. We'll be over with to start the regular season. We'll be getting into the week 1 games on the weekend. But Tripp, thanks you again coming on. It's always great to hear your in-depth analysis and nuggets, and make sure you tell everybody where to find you.
I appreciate having me on, guys. I really do enjoy talking football with you, and it's good to catch up. And as y'all know, I can find me at footballguys.com these days, and been writing up scheme changes, looking at what the impact of new coordinators will be on player personnel and deployment and opportunities. So it's been fun to write. This is my favorite time of year. It's fun to see how many things you can get right and then watch it play out in the season and then be disappointed with all the things you got wrong.
I just want to thank you, Tripp, for the generous donation you made to the breast cancer cause and all the support you gave with the jersey situation that we're giving away next week, 24th, folks. Go check it out on the any of the accounts associated with our podcast or any of the guys on here. So, Tripp, again, thanks a lot, man. And don't let them fool you, folks, because I actually got an open invite for next Friday, too, if Tripp would like to join us. We'll see, though. But, again, thanks a lot.
Thank you, buddy.
That's going to do it for us. We'll be back next week bringing you more IDP information leading up to the regular season. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you.